Welcome to Fueling Your Legacy, hosted by Samuel Knickerbocker. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a new, stronger foundation essential in creating your legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. Welcome back to Fueling Your Legacy, and I am honored to have my brother Rex in the podcast today. We were talking a few weeks ago, and I've been thinking about doing some guest interviews with book reviews because I think that a group discussion about a book, we can actually learn a lot more. I love what Napoleon Hill says in his books about where two minds are there, then we can actually collaborate and actually get somewhere and learn a lot more than if there's just one of us talking about it. So I appreciate him offering to be on here to talk about this book and to have this topic be discussed. The book we're going to talk about today is Mindset by Carol Dweck, and we're going to have a link in below. If you like this information, go ahead and share it on, take a screenshot, share it on Instagram, and I will be sure to give you a shout out on the next podcast. And then also like, comment, and review. And that would be fantastic. That way we can move up and reach more people with this awesome information. I did a podcast earlier on Monday about mindset and some of the different things that the way it can shift and become into our lives and how it can help us. Today, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into maybe some more personal experiences and very much target around this book of the fixed and growth mindset. If this is the first time hearing about it, fixed mindset is basically the idea that who you are is a product of your past and that you're not really able to change. You're locked in your ways. And thus, when you're confronted with change, you get sad, depressed, you have anxiety, things of those nature, those feelings, because you feel up to the challenge to actually change. A growth mindset is more one who's going to see a challenge, see a setback, and turn that into a positive and say, okay, how can I grow from this? This was really hard feedback, but I'm excited to learn and grow. I'm going to learn a lot from this. And it's just two different ways of looking at things. And so we're going to dig into how those two different things, two different mindsets can impact our relationships with our family members, spouses, children, business partners, parents even, and just with everyday trial and error life that we go through. We all have to experience different things, or get to experience different things rather, that can make us better. And if we can choose into that identity, we'll say 50% of the time, we're going to be a lot happier. Once we can create that identity as growing into a more full identity, then we're just going to be happier in the long run because it will be a consistent part of us. And it will launch us into more fulfillment. And then also we can be a light and a standard for other people so that they too can adopt this mentality. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. A good book outside of this one, I actually wrote a book called The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. If you'd like that, just send me a direct message on Instagram at sam.knickerbocker, or you can go onto my Facebook and do Samuel Knickerbocker and you'll find me there. But definitely, if you want access to that book, direct message me, I'll send it out to you. It's not too long, but it really helps us understand why we need to build a legacy and who we're building this legacy for. I think you may be surprised at the first 2 sections of that book. If you haven't listened to any other podcasts that I've done, then it will be a wonderful surprise for you. But I'm going to welcome Rex here. Rex, he has helped me a lot shape who I am. Some of the most defining moments in my life, probably one of the top 3 most defining moments in my life, came from an experience with him, and I'm grateful for that. And it helped me just really confront who I am, which we're going to talk about today, confront the reality of how we're showing up. Too often in our lives, because we don't want to hurt people's feelings, because we don't want to be too honest. I did a podcast on this earlier about honesty and integrity, and honesty is always going to be subjective. It's always going to be your opinion, but it can be your opinion rather than what you think somebody else wants your opinion to be. And so being honest with me and showing us really what it is, rather than wrapping a porcupine in a blanket, we let the porcupine poke people, and then they learn who's okay to poke and who's not okay to poke, or maybe they should just put their quills away and not poke anybody. So with that introduction, I'm excited to have you here, Rex. Thank you.
Thank you. Good introduction. Hi, all. My name is Rex Knickerbocker, same last name.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Okay. So yeah, this book, Mindset, was pretty useful to me in the past month. I listened to it, downloaded it. I actually saw a Facebook post about it. The Facebook post was just a little blurb of fixed versus growth mindset. And then I started looking into where that information had come from. And it said, well, this information is from Carol Dweck, and she wrote an article. And then I looked for that, and then I found out she had a book. So I downloaded the book and listened to it 3 times. And it was very, very useful. It's highly recommended by me for parents, coaches, or basically any other human.
What would you say the overarching feel or purpose of the book was? If you were to condense it down to like 1 or 2 sentences, what do you think Carol Dweck was trying to get across in the book?
I think Carol Dweck, what I liked about what she kind of prefaced and said was that it's like a basic core belief, which is weird because you get down to like a small belief. It's like maybe if you believe in Santa or not, that's gonna determine whether or not you look for Santa presents under the tree. And so these core beliefs would kind of trickle down or permeate up into other beliefs about yourself. And so the overarching message was you don't have to change. It's not like you, by learning this information, now you're obligated to be a different person, but it allows you to let yourself to change. So it's not even necessarily a huge motivational book. Once you read this, you're going to want to do a bunch of things, but it's kind of like breaking down some barriers, or maybe there's some walls that now after reading the book, they're windows, and you can kind of let yourself change. And change is where she kind of shows the results. But I think sometimes it's a problem where we focus on the results, because that's kind of what the book is about. It's saying, hey, we're not going to focus on results 100%. In fact, we'll tell you what the results of changing the mindset are, but that's not necessarily the reason you even want to change your mindset. Oh, because I want good results. It's almost better to just, with the changed mindset, you're not focused or fixed on having a certain amount, being a certain way, whatever. You're enjoying and letting yourself look at different opportunities, and you're more happy about growth, more happy about change than you are about who you are, where you are, what you do, how much you have. Because ultimately, in a growth mindset, if you're where you are and you stay there, then there's nothing to be happy about or proud of. So it doesn't matter where you are or where you end up. It matters that you were able to grow throughout that time.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that is a really good summary of her intention with the book. And a few things came to my mind. There's different books, and we did read different books for different reasons. Some books are meant purely for comic relief. Some are meant just for like fictional pleasure, or we just want a lighthearted something. There's a lot of personal development books that you get into, and I would say I've read a lot of books, and most of those books tend to focus on an outcome. They focus on like an action step, change this, and this in your life, and things will be better. And so there's those books, and I think those have their place. This book is really an awareness book. And one of my coaches, Travis Brady's his name. I would suggest you all check him out on Facebook and Instagram. But he says you're only as
potentially harmful as you are blind.
Yeah, and potentially successful or as powerful as you are aware. And so this book is, as Rex said, it's not something that you're going to go into this book thinking, oh, it's going to change it could change your whole life. But the purpose is not to change your whole life. The purpose is not to give you like a bunch of action steps of things to change. The purpose of the book is just to create awareness in your life. We're going to talk today about some specific things that could help us make some changes, or some specific examples of where we used to be one way, act one way, and then get certain results. And we're going to change that and show you kind of what's potential in our own lives. But it's definitely a book of awareness. And that's kind of been my experience with it, at least. It's made me more aware of who I am And a phrase that I like to say is you have to identify your identity. And this book helps you identify your identity down to the core. What are some of your very specific beliefs that are creating the way you act? And
I just want to say, so like your identity to the core, this doesn't even have to be your personal identity. Like you can, by reading this book, this core belief, fixed versus growth mindset, applies to all humans, probably all species. So like you're going to get this new identity, but it's not going to be a, oh, I dug deep in my soul and I found this about myself. It's going to be, you're realizing something about the entire human race that everyone shares, and it's a basic trait, and just changing the way you see that trait / like knowing, like the science supports Carol Dweck's belief system, but it doesn't hurt to go results-based beliefs. Believe something because it helps you. That's totally fine. But yeah, that's actually my preference is results-based beliefs. If I'm going to create a belief system, I want it to help me.
Right.
But yeah.
And I think that a lot of the help for, at least for me, when I've read it and dealt with this subject, a lot of the belief that helps me is how does that help me show up in the world? How does it help me bless the lives of others? How does it change the way I view others? Because a large part of becoming aware of who you are is, once you're aware of who you are, all of your good qualities and your bad qualities, really just aware of who you are, then it enables you to have compassion for those around you. It enables you to be more patient with those around you because you're now viewing essentially yourself. When somebody else is doing something you don't quite recognize why, the conversation is no longer directed at them. You're using them as a sounding board often, but really you're having a conversation with yourself about your own insides. I mean, it's so common in the business world, specifically in the entrepreneurial world. It's all about your associations. Find out who your 5 associations are and make sure they're pulling you up. Well, the reason for that is too often if we associate with people who are trying to pull us down, it's not that they don't want us to succeed. It's that they don't believe in their ability to succeed. And as a result of them not believing in themselves, they're sharing their belief about themselves with you and directing it towards you. And this same thing can be very helpful. It's a principle that can be used for positive or negative. If I start to believe in myself and start to see myself differently, then I'm going to start to share that and project that belief about myself onto others, that I can change, that I can grow, that I can love more, I can care more, that I can serve more. And as I start to project that onto others, then to a degree, they're going to start believing in themselves more. And it's really a book of service. It's a book of love. It's a book of kindness, not just to yourself, but to all of those around you. But one of the beginning portions of the book is helping identify where do we adopt these beliefs? Where does this belief really start and get rooted in ourselves? And at what age? I mean, they did studies all the way down to very, very young people, but at what age do we begin to adopt this fixed mindset versus a growth mindset?
Right, and they found that, at what age did they find? It was pretty young.
It was like 2.5 years old for some of the kids, up to 4.
And that could be that they started to adopt it, or it could be that kind of just like when you learn language, you make some assumptions. You make some assumptions that the apple is the apple, and it turns out the assumption is correct, right? But some assumptions aren't so clear. They're not so easy to correct. And so those might not have even been trained into the child. In fact, you might have, people raised in the same household that were trained in, the same exact way. But it's such a small assumption that really doesn't get challenged. And they don't necessarily start doing testing of that assumption, I'm guessing, when they're little. And it's kind of a, catch-22, self-fulfilled prophecy. You could test either assumption and you'd be right. So that's the problem.
So sometimes that is the case. But Rex, I'm curious, when do you feel like your first experience of inside of yourself feeling like you were fixed? When do you first remember that happening?
I would guess the first time I was punished and maybe praised, but I don't know if I was praised at that young of an age, so who knows. But the first time I was punished, I was probably feeling that it's almost like the goal of the punishment was to kind of get me to feel bad about something about myself. So I would say I wouldn't know the first time I was ever punished, but I feel like during punishment, you kind of get this feeling. I'm going to bring up an example from the book right now. It's an example of a child that bumps a can of nails down. The nails fall on the ground, and they make a big mess. And the dad's in the room with this child, and the son just starts to cry. He's really sad that he's made a mess. And then the dad says, that's not what you do when the nails fall. And he's like, well, what do you do? And he says, you say, the nails fell. Let's pick them up. I'll pick them up. And that was really cool, because instead of getting angry at his son, he taught him a lesson about kind of just one way of reacting to when shit happens, when shit falls down in your life. You can either just, fucking cry about it like nothing, like nobody's business. You can get depressed. And then his alternative message was, you can just go about, acknowledge where you are, be real, and then start changing it. Like, there's no need to have any negative emotion attached to it. It was really matter of fact. And so the kid says after the dad tells him that, he's like, thanks, Dad. Thank you. So.
Thank you for loving and understanding. That's a huge key. For me, I don't know exactly when I first adopted this belief of growth. I think it really came down from my first feeling of identity, and that was when I experienced when my grandpa, we were driving in a truck, and he put his hand on my knee and said, hey, Sam, I believe in you. Your voice is pleasant. It's something that could lead somebody to greatness and maybe be on the radio someday. And that experience created in me an identity of a leader. It created in me an identity that I could help and bless other people's lives. That's where I feel like I always was. My goal inside my head was that I had a talent. I had something that I could bless people with. I didn't know how that was going to happen. I didn't know how it was going to show up. And so I was doing that throughout my life. And this is came to a head kind of where I thought I was leading my family. I thought I was blessing my family. I thought I was helping my family. But the way I was showing up was more of an aggressive dictator, right? Which, to be completely frank, I didn't mind too much, because I thought I was protecting my siblings from a worse dictator in the house. And so I figured my wrath was going to be less painful, less detrimental to my siblings than the wrath of my mother at that point in time. And so I thought I was being of service. What I didn't know is how I was impacting, how I was showing up. Because in my mind, I had this wonderful story that I was telling myself about how I was so great, how I was being a public servant, all these things, but then it wasn't showing up that way. And Rex was kind enough to, one day he got frustrated really, and was done with the situation that I was dictating to my brother, who got to sleep on his bed, and he came in and he held me until I got it, basically. He says, is an indefinite amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Sam was like, he held me for a really long time. I don't know how long it was. And to me, it was an indefinite amount of time. I was not going to let go. I mean, I could have been there days, who knows, but we were only there probably an hour, maybe less. But it was, I wanted to communicate to him what it felt like for the other people in the room when he would walk in. Because I could see, right? He couldn't see, because every time he was in the room, he would see what it was like with him in the room. But I could see that everyone tense up and just like you would any dictator. When the king walks in that likes to slit throats, everyone's like, perfect order, right? And there's some truth to what Sam says, right? Like a dictatorship isn't necessarily that bad until someone tries to topple it, then everyone dies.
Right. And so this experience, it changed the way I viewed my, it exposed all the cushions. It exposed all the layers that I had surrounded myself with of the story I was telling myself, and made me confront reality of how I was impacting others. And that's what I think this book helps the most with, is there's people in our lives where they are living a life in a fixed mindset, where they don't, but it's not about that they want to stay who they are. I think that's fine if that's what you want, but they're living a life that they believing that they don't have a choice, that they have to stay who they are. And that is what I think is dangerous. It's not that you choose to stay who you are. It's that you think you have to stay who you are. And that's where I would say this book is more of an awareness book, because it's not there to change you. It's not there to say you should change and that you should have this other mindset. The differentiation between the mindsets is really the awareness level of the mindset. It's totally fine if you know and you're confident in your ability to change, and you choose to keep some things the same because it's not worth the effort, because you actually like who you are, you've created who you are, then there's no need to like focus on or feel bad about staying in that identity. But if you don't believe that you have a choice, that's where the danger comes. And I think that's really the differentiation, is the awareness. And so for those people in your life that are going through this process of learning their identity, or maybe they've already been given their identity from somebody, parents, siblings, their social peers, their business, their job, whatever it is, if they've already been assigned an identity by somebody else, how can we help them recognize that doesn't have to be their identity, that they can change, and it's okay to change, and it's okay to be different a little bit. And so share about that, Rex. When did you make that transition from, okay, I've lived this life. What was it like living the life? What was your results? How'd you feel about yourself in the fixed mindset area of your life? And then what was the transition like?
So I guess I had some poignant experiences as a teenager that really affected an identity that I had about myself, sexual identity. I felt that I had the weakness that I could become like a potential pedophile. I thought that was because of the poignant experience that I had, I kind of got scared of myself in a way, and scared of who I might become. And I felt that was a basic character trait about myself. And I didn't question whether or not that type of a character trait could be altered. And for me, this book has really been more about the way I've applied it to my life is character traits, not necessarily intelligence. And I know they're kind of like hand in hand, like you're the smart person, or you're good at math. Like that's a character trait sort of, and it also relates to intelligence. So to me, the character trait was, you've got this black mark in your soul where you're, or a demon that I was carrying around with me for forever. Like anytime I would confront that thought, it was like, I need to be careful about my situation, because I feel that I have this weakness, right? And so it was that was one of the biggest things that I was able to start to process. I won't say I fully processed it, but I was able to start to process the fact that I don't have to have that weakness. And in her book, she talks about all these people like that made physical changes. Let's say they had the weakness of, they had an illness when they were a kid. Doctor said they'd never walk. And then what do you know? They didn't believe that they couldn't change. And they made it their goal in life to get better. So then on a physical level, for exercise, whatever, they become an Olympian gold medalist, right? They're like the best in the world. And they started out as having zero chance by all counts. Now we've seen that story, we've heard it before, and we think, wow, that's amazing. But actually applying it to yourself in the areas of your life where you do have a fixed mindset is a big deal. And then also what you feel gratitude or gratifying, what you enjoy, what you feel proud of about who you are. Like everyone wants to feel good about who they are, but what things make you feel good about who you are? Do you feel good about who you are for who you are now? Or do you feel good about who you are for how far you've come, or for what growth you've experienced? And there's a difference. Like to me, I would feel, I would want to be first place as opposed to, getting just tracking my improvement and like competing against myself. I would just say, well, who wouldn't want to be first place and compete against everyone else? But if you take your joy from competing against yourself, I'm not trying to encourage you to become the best, because I don't even want you to care about becoming the best. But the data shows, and like the examples show, that when you do focus on competing with yourself, then a lot of times these people do become the best in the world, because they just keep trying to do something that they enjoy. And what they enjoy, instead of being at the top, they enjoy climbing. And so if you find a hill where you're at the top, that's awesome. But if you have a fixed mindset, you're going to feel fucking great. You're going to be like, yep, I'm king of the hill. I like it. I like what I see. Everything's below me, and I've conquered it. I feel great. I've conquered it. Instead, if you're a growth mindset, you're going to be like, well, where do I go from here? Because they don't actually, a growth mindset person doesn't actually enjoy being on top. They enjoy climbing, I
think part of that, if you've adopted a growth mindset, then you believe that other people can outdo you. Other people can get to where you are. Mm-hmm. And so if you just stay where you are, then that's not acceptable, because just because you're there doesn't mean that you're always going to be on top. I don't think that people with growth mindsets don't like being on top. It's that they know that there's no way to stay on top except for to keep going and to keep learning and to keep growing. And that can be crucial in the developmental phase, especially in children, but throughout. I mean, if you didn't learn it when you're a kid, today's a perfect day to start learning it, that you can grow and that you can become. Now, when we were talking before, you had mentioned kind of an experience of why you like, how do I say this? Basically, you don't like being asked. Yeah, you don't like being wrong. Right. So how does this play into a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset of being wrong? Because I'm confident. I meet with a lot of people. I know myself, which is equally, I don't like to be wrong. And I've learned to deal with that a certain way, which I'll share after this, but I want to hear Rex's opinion. But I know you're sitting there thinking, man, I don't like to be wrong either. Being wrong is the worst. I have to be right. And I need to be, especially if you're a parent, you have to be in control in the situation in your kids, or you think you do. And so you're right. When it comes to you're right or your kid's right, you're right. When it comes to sometimes a lot of spousal relationships, people just choose that they're right and they'll make other people change because they don't want to be wrong. And that can cost a lot of people a lot of not just growth, but in business, it can cost a ton of things. If you make a decision and you recognize it's wrong, but you are so stubborn because you can't be wrong that you just stick to it, you just ride the horse down in flames, that can be damaging. So learning that it's okay to be wrong and learning how to express that it's okay to be wrong is really important. And I'll share two examples about that, one with my wife and another experience after this, but I want to hear your side of that as well.
Okay, so I've got 2 points here that it's the difference between being right or being able to say, being comfortable with saying, I don't know, with yourself and the universe, and then with other people. So I'll start with other people because it still affects me today. I still have feelings well up when someone asks me a question and it sounds to me that I make it mean that they expect me to have the answer. And I have this identity of having most of the answers. That's an identity that I have for whatever reason.
Where do you feel like you got that identity?
And I probably got that identity from when I was, just as I grew up. I think I had some sort of higher intelligence, let's say, in terms of talent, academic talent. And so it was recognized and it was kind of, I don't want to say fostered because that's like a positive word, but it was noticed and it was like encouraged via me being intelligent. So I was good at certain things. I knew a lot of things. My brain worked faster at solving a puzzle, let's say. That was my identity. It wasn't always true when we would set out a puzzle, but that was the identity. So yeah, that's probably where it came from, just the way I was raised. I got a lot of satisfaction from the praise that I received. And that praise was not necessarily growth mindset praise, like, oh, look how hard you tried and you did such a great job. I'm proud of the effort. Instead, it was, look how smart you are, or look how attractive or how handsome you are. Instead of maybe, oh, look, you tried really hard. I can see you tried on a lot of things today before you decided that outfit. But it was like, oh, you're so handsome. And what did I do to become handsome? I thought that was kind of not something I had worked toward. But I did feel like I worked toward my intelligence. So I felt like that was some part of me, that was my core, that I could actually be proud of. So yeah, that's what kind of the identity that caused the identity of me having a lot of the answers for other people.
So I just want to bring attention to this before we move on. As a parent, I have one kid. My wife's going to have another baby here, and hopefully this month. But that's something that I battle every day. How do I address my son? How do I tell him how cute I think he is? And how do I shift the language from, oh, you're so cute, or wow, you're doing so great, or you're fantastic, to wow, you tried really hard, and praise an effort rather than a result. And that's it. Just about when you think you're just praising the effort, when you think you've got to praising the effort, there's always another level of, wow, maybe I'm still praising the result of something. So it's always something to think about, especially for parents out there thinking, how can I engender this growth mindset into my children so that they literally feel like they can accomplish anything. My memory of my parents, there was a lot of negative things in our childhood, but the one thing that I love and I have always felt that my parents did really well was they always believed that I could achieve whatever we wanted. And I would say that I feel like that was spoken to everybody, if not to everybody, definitely to me, that we had infinite potential and that anything we put our mind to, we could achieve. Didn't matter what it was. My experience, I was homeschooled pretty much my whole life. And if I decided I want to do something or study something, my parents would go get out, or my mom primarily, she would go get the books from the library, she'd go get videos, and we would learn about it. And then if I decided 2 weeks later that I didn't want to do that anymore, she said, okay, well, what else do you want to learn about? And we'd go learn about that. And there was never like wait, we already decided you were going to learn about airplanes, so we're going to stick to airplanes this year. No, it's like, oh, you changed your mind? Okay, let's go learn about something else. And that fostered in me the mindset that it's okay to change. It's okay to decide that something didn't work out and you want to learn something else. And so, but how did that play into you about needing to be right?
I was sitting here smiling when you talked about telling someone that they're cute. And I've never heard anyone else say this, but I say it every time, basically, when I see a cute little kid and I'm telling them, oh, you're so cute. Like, then I'm like, but you probably don't care about that, do you? Because I didn't when I was a kid. Like, if someone said, oh, you're so attractive, it almost was a boon. It wasn't a good thing necessarily for me, even though I was sort of proud of it, but not like I didn't do anything. And I don't want to be seen as something that I had no part in doing, right? I don't want my character to be judged by something that I had no part in doing. I had no part in my brown hair. This is not dyed, right? If it was dyed, then it would be brown hair that I made myself. But I had no part in a lot of my physical appearance traits. I do wear clothes. That's, good job, Rex. But anyway, all right. So back to being right. So for me, it's still tough. So when someone asks me, hey, what's this? I try and correct them and say, hey, could you instead ask me, like, do you know where, the remote is? Instead of saying, where's the remote? Because that fucking bugs the hell out of me. Why? Because it's like you're expecting me to know, and I'd rather, but it, in my mind, when someone says, where's the remote? I don't hear, hey, do you know where the remote is? I hear, you know where the remote is, and please tell me where it is. And then I get offended by the assumption that I even knew. And ultimately, I think that the offense comes from that, it probably comes from the identity that I know a lot of things. And so when people ask me, I typically have an answer. And that identity, then when someone asks me something I don't know, I feel like my credibility level is going down because I had to say I don't know, And so for me, answering to other humans, other people in my life, the I don't know is a difficult thing to say. And I kind of relate it to the people that are like a yes man or something, a yes person, where they have a really hard time saying no. It was almost like that for me. It was really hard for me to like confront the fact that I don't know and tell that person. And that I'm working on. But in the past, the other, like I said, there's two methods. There's like whether you're willing to say I don't know to other people, or whether you're willing to say I don't know to yourself, / the universe, right? When you're asking questions, basic questions about life. So at some point, I'm ex-Mormon. At some point I started questioning my worldview, and my worldview, I'm going to keep that really broad because that's not just a religious worldview. There's everything that you're raised, your culture, everything kind of affects the way you see the world. And I started questioning all of it, right? But before I started that questioning process, it was a lot more difficult for me to feel comfortable with ambiguity, comfortable with the I don't know answer to some of those basic questions about life, purpose of life, meaning of life, whatever. I preferred certainty over ambiguity. And in fact, the result was I preferred certainty over being right. And I like to be right, and I like my beliefs to be accurate, but lacking the accurate answer. My tendency before would have been to be certain about something, even if it was wrong. And so going through that whole alteration of worldview, that was a heart-wrenching, process. It wasn't easy. I almost don't recommend it because it was tough. But going through and asking all those questions, and then having the answer be to a lot of them, I don't know, put me in a place where that's still my answer to a lot of things. Like I'm comfortable now. Like some people get comfortable with change, and I'm comfortable with the fact that I don't know. Like I'm not letting that bother me and force me to find an answer. Whereas with other people, like a math problem, you set me in front of a riddle or a math problem, people, I've kind of got a reputation, I guess. Some people are like, yeah, I know how to get Rex in the same spot. Kind of like scratch and sniff at the bottom of the pool. That's how you drown somebody, right? Well, they're like, I know how to get Rex to stay in one spot. You just give him a math problem that takes him a while to solve. He won't get up till it's done, right? Till he figures it out. And that's me answering to myself, but also answering to the world, because someone else knew that I had that math problem. So I'm like, I have to figure out the answer, So it's that reputation thing where I kind of try to keep it up. But obviously there's reputation is important and all that. There's reasons for everything, but it can harm you when you allow it to control you and kind of affect you negatively. So letting go of some of that reputation and saying, hey, I don't know. Being willing to say that out loud is what has helped my relationship. Because before I was just like sitting there offended, as opposed to vocalizing that I don't know where the remote is or whatever the question was.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it goes back to, if you guys were listening, kind of what I said before, and then how that applies to what Rex just said. But he was taking something that he felt internally about himself, this inner dialogue that he was telling himself, and he was taking that dialogue and he was projecting it onto somebody else, as if they were telling him that dialogue. And they weren't. They never were saying that. They were just asking a question, but he was projecting it out to there. Now, for me, I from a very young age, I learned, well, one, I gained the identity that people were going to follow me and that I could lead people. And then as I grew older, I became a great salesman, doing door-to-door sales. And so that fortified my identity that when I spoke, people believed me. People naturally will tend to believe the things I say. Now, for me, that was a struggle when I was dating, because I knew how to explain things. I knew the right tones to use, whatever, to be believed. And that didn't always help me, because from a professional perspective, I need people to believe what I say. But if everybody takes what I say at face value and like, well, Sam said it, and he says it with confidence and certainty, and so he must be right, I know that I'm not right. I know inside myself that I'm just still trying to figure out this world. So I don't really know the answers, but everything I say, I make a living off of saying things with certainty. And so I'm not going to give up that quality. So there's always positives and negatives to every quality. There's been a few things that Rex has shared. Well, these are the things that I think were dark about myself. That's true, but that is also probably one of the best things about him, is his love and his concern for children. So to say like, oh, I could have been a pedophile. You could have been a pedophile. Any one of us could have been a pedophile. But also, if you didn't have a deep connection and love for children, then you wouldn't be who you are. You wouldn't be such an adamant protector of them if you didn't have that intense feeling towards them. So I think that with everything, we have to be kind to ourselves and recognize that everything we think we hate about ourselves, maybe go back in and reframe. How could I look at this? What's the most positive thing that comes from these feelings? What's a positive way to look at this thing? I really care when somebody says something negative to me about that. Why do you care so much? Well, it's because I really want them to, I love them and I want to please them. Well, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing that you want to please them or that you want them to be happy. You just need to detach how they feel about you from how you feel about yourself. And so this is what I find very crucial in the development of our children, is that we fortify them to care about themselves more than what we think about them. And that's my opinion. I plan on raising my children that way. I'm okay with my children telling me I'm wrong and getting feedback from my children. I don't have to be right in every situation. And something I learned, because in the dating process, I struggled with dating because people would just accept what I said. And I'm somebody who really loves an intense, grueling conversation of differing opinions. I just love that thing. A quote that we learned, it was way back when we studied ancient American history, not ancient, but early American history. Patrick Henry and Ben Franklin, they would always argue about their politics. They had different political opinions. And Patrick Henry's line was, hey, if you can't argue with somebody, shake hands and walk away friends, then you're doing it wrong, right? And I totally took that to heart. I'm like, man, I just want some healthy, grueling discussion. But I recognize that I have this trait that can be really bad, man. If I chose to use that maliciously or lie or deceitfully, and people just believed everything I said, that could be a really bad trait. I choose to use it effectively and choose to use it positively and to share truth. Now, because I need to be able to differentiate that, I've learned from myself that rather than dealing with the identity, I'm also somebody who likes to be right. I like to be certain. I like to be certain. And I learned from a young age that I wasn't the most knowledgeable. And so what I've done to correct that, and it might be helpful for any of you who have this same trait, is rather than letting somebody else tell me I don't know something, that doesn't help. And rather than feeling down on myself for not knowing something, I just say, hey, you know what? I may be wrong. I'm not positive, but this is what I think. And I'll share that with somebody. Or if I'm going in to give somebody advice, maybe even unsolicited advice, rather than just telling them, hey, I think you should do this. I can say that and it'll sound convincing and they will feel terrible. Or I could say, hey, I don't know what exactly you're doing or why you're doing it this way. From my perspective, I know I'm not right. I can learn a lot. I'd love to hear your opinion, but this is kind of something that would make more sense to me if we did it this way. And it's a soft way of entering your opinion, but also inviting a discussion to, hey, what am I missing here? Where am I off base? And if you're walking into the discussion from where am I off base, then people feel more comfortable sharing. It removes the confrontation because you've already removed that in the first statement, and you can actually have a healthy discussion and there's no anger in that interchange. And so for me and my wife, that has created a crazy harmonious relationship, no matter how stressful the situation is or how at odds our opinions are. Believe me, there's times where my wife and I just have different opinions. But there's no anger. We aren't yelling. It's always just a healthy discussion about, hey, let's identify where people are and what they actually believe, and then let's see how we can work together. And so that's maybe something.
Sounds like something I need to apply a little bit. But yeah,
adopt an easier way of having that conversation. So that's helped me a lot, and it helped me tons with my wife. My wife, when we first got married, she felt like anytime I would say, hey, that's interesting or that's different, the way you're washing the dishes, the way you fold my clothes. I'm pretty particular about my clothes being folded. So I didn't like the way she did it. And so I was like, I'll just fold my own clothes. If you insist on folding them that way, that's okay. You can fold your clothes that way. I will fold my own clothes from now on. And she's like, well, how do I make you happy? And I'm like, it's not about that. It's about, this is how I like it done. And I understand if you don't want to do it that way, I will do it that way. And then she was like, no, I don't. I just felt like you were attacking me. Okay. Well, I'm not attacking you. I just have a different opinion. And as we discussed that, we were able to come to an agreement. And I love my wife, and she folds my clothes the way I like them folded now. And it's fantastic. But that didn't happen with everything. I've made concessions on my part of the way she likes to do things, the way she likes to put our son to bed. In a lot of cases, I've adopted a lot of those habits to make sure that we're keeping a consistent ritual there. So there's give and take in a relationship. There needs to be, and it's just about discussion.
Yeah, it's surprising how small certain things can be when both people feel appreciated and loved and respected. There's a lot of things that I'd be willing to do. Like if I felt the right level of appreciation for what I'm doing, I'd probably do it for free for 100 years, right? So it's interesting. The difficulty of passing those bridges doesn't have to be so big. Like it turns out Charlie folds Sam's clothes now, right? Mm-hmm. So it wasn't that she didn't want to fold them if she couldn't fold them her own way. It's that she needed that communication, and she needed to hear and feel that appreciation and love for whatever she was doing. And then the extra effort to change, change your habit, or, fold clothes a little differently isn't all that hard. It's just hard when someone else is expecting or forcing you to do it, and you feel like a slave, and you feel, marginalized or disrespected. It's like, then it becomes really, really hard to do something that ultimately doesn't have to be hard. Like the change in behavior doesn't have to be so hard, as long as the communication is there. Because Sam does love Charlie, and he does appreciate Charlie. He probably appreciated the clothes being folded the wrong way. But once the communication is there, then it's a lot easier for those little things to change. And so yeah, it's interesting how little it is, but it becomes big when it's attached to some other appreciation and respect issues,
Yeah, and something that we fostered in our relationship, and we probably will end on this point, but thinking about it all goes back to the mindset of fixed and growth. My wife did not really adopt a growth mindset until we got married. There were certain things that she felt like she could grow in, but it was more based on like effort not effort. It was more based on results. So she's really good at golfing, and she got praised for golfing. So she worked her tail off to become a better golfer. She was really good at softball, and she would work her tail off to become better at softball. And when other people didn't recognize how good she was, or didn't help her get her a chance to shine on the court, that really upset her. And that's okay. But adopting a growth mindset where it's all about learning, it's all about growing, and it's all internal, that helps a ton in the relationship of communication. It also, you aren't scared of a huge blow up if you share something with that person, if you guys are both on the same page of a growth mindset. You guys are both understood that you're communicating from this growth mindset perspective, then you aren't putting things off until they're compounding, and then there's a big blow up. It's as soon as something is not feeling right with you, then we address it. And to a fault, sometimes on my part, I've gotten to the point where I can recognize very quickly when my wife is upset. When there's a slight tone in her voice that's different than her happy self, then I know immediately. And I'll stop everything I'm doing. I'll say, hey, what's going on? What's wrong? How can we help you? How can we help you feel more loved or cared about or whatever? And sometimes it's in public. Sometimes it's in front of other people. And she's like, Sam, shut up. Stop making a big deal about this. We'll talk about it later. But for me, it's so important that she's able to feel loved and cared about and happy that I want to resolve that immediately. And sometimes that's not the best time to do it. And so she has to remind me, hey, we'll talk about it later. And then we do talk about it later. But once you recognize and you get good with this growth mindset, and you can communicate from that perspective, then you can address things immediately, and nothing ever gets so big that there's a big blow up or issue or big disagreement, because as soon as something starts to irritate or bug or like be a little bit off or a little different than you're used to, then you can address it and see if that's the direction you really want to go or not. And it just creates a lot more harmony and unity in relationships. And that happens at work, it happens at home with your children, with your spouse, and at church, in your religion, whatever it is, with your relationship with yourself. Recognize those small things and change it. So I'm curious, this will be like the last thing and we'll be done, but what have you seen change in your life since you've read this book? You've said you've read it 3 times. What specific things are you taking as action steps you're applying on a daily basis, or at least attempting to?
It really, I'll be honest, I haven't applied it everywhere yet. I know that there's for each person, there's parts of their life where they don't question whether growth is possible, and they can probably see the results in those areas that they have actually tried and put effort toward those things. And then there's other parts of their life that, in my case, were pretty deep down and covered and hidden almost. Here's a big difference, but I'm basically going to say that it was just that one character trait is basically the crowning jewel, I guess, of what I learned. And I intend to continue to push myself toward enjoying the effort, being proud of the effort, and being less proud of the result and the success, being more proud of the effort. But it really was that just character trait of having that weakness. The way that it's changed me is that I was willing to talk about it finally. Like having it be a character trait mark on my character, having it be that it was too taboo for me to even vocalize, even to the people that I've shared, every taboo thing ever that I've thought or done. Like there's people I've shared all that with, but that one thing was one I didn't share with anyone. And being able to change my mind about whether it had to stay with me forever was a big deal. So I think about it a little bit like the people that are alcoholics. They go to Alcoholics Anonymous and they feel after they've become an alcoholic that they've got some weakness, or they're more likely to become an alcoholic. And what my new belief set is that you could, people can change. You could get to a point that you're actually less likely to become an alcoholic. You're less likely to become a pedophile than the average person. In fact, less likely than you were before, less likely than you are after you become an addict or whatever. You can change enough, and you don't even need necessarily to have that constant reminder of, you were once an alcoholic, so you better keep on your toes. I don't think you even have to keep on your toes. I think you can change, become a different person in that area of your life. No more keeping on your toes, none of that. You can actually be less likely to fall back into drugs, fall back into alcohol, have some weakness of whatever your demons are that you're carrying. You can get rid of them. So
yeah, completely agree. It's just an awesome book, Mindset by Carol Dweck. If you get a chance to read it, I'm going to be putting a link again in the show notes below, and on Facebook. I'll post this on Facebook as well. But take the time to listen to the book and maybe take some notes about how it's impacting you. I'd love to hear your opinion about the differences that it's having in your life, and the mindset that you're able to adopt and foster in your family, to have a more fulfilling and happy life. So thanks again, and we'll catch you next time on Fueling Your Legacy.
Peace.
Thanks for joining us today. If what you heard resonated with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me so I can give you a shout out on the next episode. And thanks to all those who have left a review. It helps spread the message of what it really takes to build a legacy that lasts. Catch you next time on Fueling Your Legacy.